PM. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Rook.
Here.
Counsel Belanger.
Here.
Counsel Mercia.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Councilman Mercia, good, nice to see you, and safe and happy trip.
Thank you.
Joining us tonight, we have Superintendent Bill Taylor from Lowell Police, Deputy Arthur Ryan, also from the Police Department, Mary Ann Bellotta, and City Manager Kevin Murphy. Tonight on the agenda, we have 2 discussion pieces based on motions. The first one by Councilor Kennedy was a discussion of the matrix study. Superintendent Taylor?
Thank you very much, Councilor Rourke and other members of the subcommittee. First of all, let me make a couple of comments about the matrix study and the context in which it was commissioned by the superintendent at the time, Ken LaValle. This study was undertaken in the 2008 timeframe. At the time, the city was in, as well as the rest of the country, in the midst of serious economic crisis and with diminishing tax revenue. So I believe this study was commissioned with the idea of trying to make better, more efficient use of the taxpayers' money. At the same time, we were facing a critical situation with our manpower situation in the city. Having said that, the study is between 6 and 7 years old at this point. So its value as an instrument to effectively manage the organization moving forward is significantly diminished because of that time frame. However, many of the recommendations have already been adopted, are in the process of being adopted, because quite candidly, they speak to the best practices for a organization of our size. I think the most noteworthy recommendation, well, first of all, let me say this. I've provided the members of the City Council as well as the city manager, both with the entire document, which is several hundred pages in its entirety, as well as an executive summary. In addition to the executive summary, you'll see that we've gone through, taken the 28 points in the executive summary, detailed them one by one, including the finding, the recommendation which was made by the Matrix consulting firm, as well as our status and our opinion per each individual recommendation. I think that the most significant, the most important part of this document is the recommendation to go through and complete a complete review and dissemination of the policy and procedures of the Lowell Police Department. That was accurate, it was very necessary, and it has been a ongoing project for the Lowell Police Department, as well as many other police agencies. I had a conversation today with several other police chiefs in the Commonwealth at a police chiefs meeting, and many organizations are wrestling with the same issue. The situation was back in 2008, we had a police department that had policy and procedures that were in many cases antiquated, which were out of date, which were not up to speed with the best practices and contemporary police practices across the country. And the other critical component of this was they were not appropriately disseminated. Some of them were disseminated via email. Some people were justifiably could say they didn't get the email, or they didn't appropriately have the ability to, to get the information, and then some people just chose not to read the emails. So you had a situation where we couldn't go back and verify that each individual employee of the police department had reviewed the policy and procedures, had received the requisite amount of training in some cases, and had the ability to weigh in on them. So that was the situation. So this recommended that we completely go through all of our policy and procedures and that we update them to be in tune with the best practices, and then we find an effective, efficient, modern way to disseminate those policy and procedures to every member of the organization. I believe we've done that at this point in terms of the dissemination. Currently, what happened was Superintendent LaValle, before he left, he had went out and contracted with a vendor, Northeast Police Accreditation Consultants. They delivered to us 105 policy and procedures that they believed were the best practices for the whole myriad of operations in the police department. So that's what I found when I took over, that we had these policies that had been delivered to the organization. When I took over, I immediately realized that this was probably the most important task facing my administration of the police department. I then decided that the appropriate way to get these policies adapted for our individual organization was to put a command-level person. I chose Captain Tom Kennedy. He's an attorney, very articulate, very well-thought-of member of the organization. I put him in charge of this process. I then also put together weekly meetings with a team of command-level personnel to go through each individual policy after the captain had delivered it to us, after he had put it essentially into our business practices. So we've been doing that. We've currently gone through 78 of the 105 policies, have been finalized from a team effort, from a committee effort, and then we've disseminated 25 of them. Very many of the high liability policies have been finalized and disseminated to the organization. We call those kind of the red policies, the one that have high liability, use of force, police pursuits, handling and management of prisoners within the organization. Most of those policies have been already disseminated. Originally, my goal was to have this entire process, the whole 105 policies and procedures of the organization, completely revised, gone through, and disseminated within a 6-month period. I must admit I was too ambitious on my timeline. Even in the matrix study, they suggest that doing a task like that should take a year at least. Well, it's not. I don't believe it's going to take us a year, but it's going to take us more than the 6 month that I envisioned. I believe we'll have all of them reviewed by the committee, certainly within the next 60 days, and then the dissemination to the employees does take a little bit of time. I don't think it's appropriate and it's not fair to each individual employee to dump 10 policies a week on them, have them go through 100 or a couple of 100 pages of policies. So we found that we had to slow the rate of the dissemination to the employees so that they could appropriately review the policies, seek feedback. In some cases, there's some training involved in it, and there's also the ability to confer with their supervisors in an appropriate way. So we've decided to roll out the policies 1, 2, 3 a week, depending on the complexity of the individual policy. Did you have a question?
Thank you, Chief. And are the police officers signing off on receiving
Yes.
these policies?
One of the things that we did do this summer, we purchased a cloud-based software program. It's called Compliance Bridge. This is really the state-of-the-art way to do your policy and procedures. So once we complete this policy and procedure, it is uploaded to this Compliance Bridge software. Each individual employee from the police department has an account. They can log in from their workstation, their home computer, their mobile device that they may have in the cruiser, and they can keyword search these policies. So then they bring up the policy on this cloud-based system. They go in, they review it, and then they sign off that they've reviewed it, and it's all captured, and we can generate reports.
Are they signing off, Chief, on the policies as a whole or individual policies?
Individual policies.
Okay.
Right. So each individual policy, we're trying currently to disseminate 2, 3 a week until we get it completed. And they sign off individually on the policy, and then they have these policies readily available to them on an electronic version, literally anywhere in the organization, in the cruisers, at their workstations.
And so is there someone that's overseeing the officers signing into this? Like, for example, maybe Officer Smith is
Right.
not keeping up to speed
Yes.
with us? Someone
do.
is checking that, right?
We do. We generate those reports on I think it's a weekly basis, and it goes to their individual commanding officers of that division, who is responsible to make sure that they comply with the policy and procedures and sign off on them when it's
Thank you.
appropriate.
I think this is necessary.
It
This
is
should be
absolutely
done.
necessary.
So that's
It's
great.
probably one of the glaring weaknesses in this organization, going back at least 10 years that I'm aware of.
Yep.
This whole policy and procedures has been languishing. A couple of different superintendents have tried to, wrestle with this issue. It's a quite monumental issue, to be quite candid with you. And so I think we found an effective way to do it. Superintendent LaValle took the first step by commissioning the accreditation consultants to generate at least a raw policy and procedures that we then went in with our team, including Captain Kennedy and the committee that I put together, and looked at each individual one and adapted them for this city, this police department, and then we've disseminated them. So I think when we complete this by certainly sometime in the spring, I believe, I hope to get it done in the March-April timeframe. This department will have a complete set of modern, up-to-date policy and procedures, and they will be disseminated appropriately, and we'll be able to, in some cases, unfortunately, we have to hold people accountable for these policies, and we'll be able to do that as we move forward.
Great. Thanks, Chief. A quick question. Can you,
Sure.
once again, give us some examples of the red policies that have already been completed
Yes.
and disseminated?
For example, the most important one would be the use of force. So anytime an officer has to use force, it's covered in that pretty comprehensive policy. It's certainly 20 pages, I think. It's in the 20 pages. So that's a good example. That one policy, we need to give each member of the organization an appropriate amount of time to review that and ask questions of their supervisors. That one, for example, has already been rolled out. But that one, we may give them 10 days to review that individual policy. There's many of these other policies that are quick, 2, 3, 4 pages that really don't require any training. That is, they can just read. We can do 3 or 4 of those in the same week sometimes.
So we have things like police chases, use of force, and then
Yes,
the
prisoner management,
prison.
booking. We've adjusted all of those, especially considering the tragic event that we're still dealing with as an organization and as a city, where we had an in-custody death. Those have all been revised and updated and disseminated to the organization. So,
Ledger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, thank you today.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. How about accreditation? How far are we away from that? What's the status, may I ask?
well, the first thing you can do with an accreditation is you have to have effective policy and procedures. That's where it begins. So my goal is to get this policy and procedure manual completed and disseminated sometime in the spring, get it up and done, and then very quickly we will start the accreditation process, at least with the state agency. There's 2 types of accreditation. One is state and one is federal. I do not believe at this point, based on the physical plant that we have over there, that we would be have the ability to get a national accreditation. Quite candidly, the physical building over there would not be conducive to a national accreditation. But I do think, and I think that's what my goal is, to get a state accreditation. Very few organizations in this state of Massachusetts can get the national accreditation for a variety of different reasons, but there are many police departments in the state that do proceed and do get state accreditation. And I think that should be a short-term goal, to get that done within the next year or 2.
Okay, what's the main barrier from getting national accreditation? The building we know.
That's one of them. That's one of the
Okay,
key ones.
is it mainly the lockup, how the stay away? I know that was an issue when I toured it with you, with
Right.
rest of the committee. Is that the biggest?
The physical plant is without question the biggest obstacle that we would face. There are some collective bargaining issues that we'd have to navigate around in terms of evaluations, things like that. It's not insurmountable, but it would be a challenge. But I think the state accreditation is doable, and I think that would be my goal, to get that accomplished in the next, I think we could do that within a couple of years. And that would be, for this organization to come that far, for the City of Lowell and the Lowell Police Department to go and get our policy and procedures completely state-of-the-art disseminated, and to get state accreditation, that's a tremendous accomplishment.
Okay, so your goal is to have state accreditation?
Yes.
Approximately 2 years?
That would be the time frame I'd like to focus on.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
that would be, what, honestly, that would be tremendous.
Okay, thank you.
There are many other recommendations in here, Counselor. If you have any questions on it, there's 28 of them total. I think that's the most significant one, without question. And there are many other of the recommendations directly relate to that. I don't know if you have any other questions on some of them.
At this point in time, I feel like welcome Deputy Fiedel here. Hey, I see you. Councilor Samaras, thank you for coming. Anybody from the public wishes to speak on the subject?
Good evening. My name is Anne Marie Page. I reside at 26 Fremont Street in Lowell. I sit on the board of the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group, and I'm the current president of the Citywide Neighborhood Council. I want to thank you all for your time. I'm sure everybody in this room agrees our top priority in the city is safety, and that's why we're here tonight. And there were different issues and different items brought up on the agenda, and I believe you have another item, second item to get to. And we have had meetings with the chief. He keeps us well informed of what's going on. He has an open door policy, which is good. He always gets back to us if we have a question or an issue. And we agree a little updating, you know, a little clipping and cutting here and there, and a little add-on here and there. And you see Mary Ann here because we love our C-Fire grant and looking for some more. But we want to see boots on the ground. That's what we want. That's what gives us our safety in our neighborhood, is to see our officers out there. And we support them, and we care about them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. Just a quick question, Chief. So, as the policies and procedures are disseminated, you know, if somebody goes a week or two, is each one given a deadline to sign on, to review it, to accomplish their overview of that, and is there a certain time frame to get back to their supervisor that's been completed?
There is. There's a minimum time frame for each policy. Some of the policies are obviously more complex and are certainly more substantial than others, so we can adjust that time frame depending on the individual policy, and we have done that. And the objective here is not to catch people not adhering to the time frame. The objective here is to get these policies out, get them disseminated, get them so that the employees can, digest them and ask questions back, and that we can have a working document as we move forward.
So if you had a new officer start tomorrow, when could one expect that officer to be, have gone through this process, start to finish?
So what we do with the new officers, we have a police officer training program where we bring new officers in, and they go through, it's flexible depending on how quickly they absorb it, but it's 10 to 14-week PTO program, and during the course of that PTO program, they're brought up to speed on all these policy and procedures, and they get a certain number of them every week that they have to go through and report back to their police officer trainer.
Thank you. Councilor Samaras, Councilor Kennedy, anything?
Thank you. Chief, regarding we have people from the neighborhood here, the neighborhood protocol, if any house has been robbed and you establish a process, how's that going?
It's good. That policy has been disseminated, I believe, in the last week or so. I can check on that, but we did go through that policy as a committee and put that out. They're already doing it. My understanding, most of it in the criminal investigation unit anyway, which is going to bear the brunt of that. The most significant part of that is to get back that personal contact with a victim in a timely manner so that we can keep them apprised of the investigation and get additional information from them. So.
Thank you. Are you just staying on this policy, or can I go into another direction?
As long as everything's done with the matrix, we can complete that and go on to our second
Okay, thank you.
item of the evening. Section 2 of the subcommittee is a discussion of the Neighborhood Crime Watch. Motion by Councilor Belanger. Once again, Chief.
Thank you very much. The Neighborhood Crime Watch is a good idea in its concept. However, I would advocate that the current configuration of the way we do community policing with the neighborhoods, I think, has many more advantages. We currently use the community organizations that are numerous across the city. Anne Marie Page is here from the Centerville Group, and I think that's a better way to do our outreach to the community, because we get the involvement that's necessary to effective community policing program without some of the baggage that comes with Crime Watch. For example, one of the most prominent things that has happened in the Neighborhood Crime Watch in the last couple of years has been that tragic incident in Sanford, Florida with Trayvon Martin. And that was a Neighborhood Crime Watch individual that obviously went too far, that took his involvement in that particular group to a level that is not acceptable. It's certainly not something that we want in our community. I think our community organizations that we use now, that we really have a very good collaborative working relationship with the police department, I think is an advantage. They are our eyes and ears in the community, but we don't have to have that, that practice of them out actually patrolling, which I personally would not advocate for. But we do, what I do advocate for, and what the concept of a neighborhood crime watch definitely would be advantageous, is that we want the community to be our eyes and ears. We want them to be a valued partner in the safety of their individual neighborhoods, and so that is a very good component of a neighborhood crime watch. And what we would advocate that they do is they get involved in the community groups. There's a See Something, Say Something campaign that Deputy Ryan has been very instrumental in promoting. We also have various social media applications that we use on a ever-increasing basis to try and get our message out and to enter into that two-way dialogue. We also have a MyPD app, which we've got, and which we actually are getting a lot of information from the members of the community. And that's those various platforms are very effective ways to get community involvement, to get people involved in all of our neighborhoods across the city, watching out, watching for their neighbors, watching for their, criminal activity in their neighborhoods, and channel that information efficiently back to the police department. So it is good, but I think the current configuration that we have, I personally like. I think it works well, and that's what I would advocate for. But, one thing with the Community Crime Watch, they put signs up around the community. And we could do that, but we could put some of these signs up in the neighborhood, but we could maybe advocate for Crime Watchers, which is a good program, MyPD app, or the See Something, Say Something. As I indicated, Deputy Ryan's very, very much a proponent of that.
Melissa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I firmly believe that perception is everything, and when police officers are walking the beat, they're visible and the public sees them, and sometimes young children and parents, through fault of their own, would say, "You better behave or I'll get the police here," and then it makes things happen to children that the police become the boogeyman, so to speak. So I'm thinking that when the police walk the beat, let's say on Middlesex Street, if occasionally they can walk into the Boys and Girls Club and just let the children get to know them, and pretty soon they'll be thinking, gee, these people are just like us. They're not the bad guy, and I think that would be a good rapport. I know that money is tight and we need our police officers on the street, but I remember years ago how the city kind of turned around because we had a little extra, and the police would actually go to like Clemente Park and play basketball with the kids. I think this is a good rapport to start the children off young, to know that the police are just like regular people too. They're not like the bad guys here, and they're going to arrest you. Let them know that you're human and that you care about them, and it's a good rapport that I think is a good thing to happen. Thank you.
I completely agree, Council.
Councilor Belanger?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, thank you. I made the motion in the fall to, we all know 2014 was a bad year, okay? A lot of the gateway cities similar to us went through the same things. But, the mission of the motion is to engage the public as well. We need their help, okay? We understand you can't be everywhere. We would need double the amount of officers to curb this problem, okay? And then we know that's not going to happen. Okay, even with the council can't do it, the police can't do it, and even with the great assistance of our neighborhood groups who are here today, can't seem to curb this, okay? So I was trying to take it a step further, engage the public. I mean, I understand, it gets, hairy, if you will, that, when you engage, some people may take it too far. I mean, I'm sure if you search the nation, you're going to find examples of someone who has, such as you did. I understand that. But that was simply the mission of the motion, because we need help, okay? We need awareness. We need the public to know how many times we've all been in neighborhood group meetings. What have we heard the public say? I was too scared to call when they hear shot. I wanted to wait 20 minutes. So obviously we need more outreach as well. I know we're all working hard, but it needs to be ramped up. If that's, if you don't want to take it that step further, I understand. But how are we going to do it? Throughout, we need to ramp up outreach, obviously. Signage, like you said in the end, I'm very pleased to see Crime Watch neighborhood or something along the lines where there's some visibility that, as Councilor Mercier stated too, children can see, everyone can see that. In this neighborhood, you know, I better watch myself, so to speak. We need more of that throughout. We need more awareness, more signage to help curb this problem. As we enter this, you know, it's winter now, but spring will soon be here, and we all know how it kicked off last year. So none of us want to see repeat to that level. I know that, and we're all working together. So I just thought it was a good idea to engage, but I understand you could bring in some things that you may not want at the same time. So our neighborhood group leaders are here. It's interesting seeing what they have to say, I know that see something, say something is out there. But I know, again, not to be repetitive, I've heard a lot of neighborhood group meetings throughout quite often after something happens in the neighborhood, I didn't want to call. I wanted to wait. That's not doing us any good. So I'm curious to see what the neighborhood group leaders have for input today, see how they'd like to go about it. But I'm just trying to, again, get more involvement and more assistance for us, Chief.
Oh, absolutely, Councilor. And I think you know, certainly the idea of the motion, absolutely, it's a great idea. We need as much community involvement and collaboration as we can get. We've recently, obviously now in the winter we're not doing it, but we've recently started a program where we're doing smaller, more intimate street corner meetings to try and, you know, engage people that maybe would be a little hesitant to come to a larger meeting outside of their neighborhood. So we're trying different strategies. You're absolutely right. And I think the signage with see something, say something at Crime Stoppers, we can certainly do that, which I think would play into that.
I'd be very satisfied with that, Chief. Thank you. Oh, that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Ms. Page?
I have identified myself, so you do have it. In regards to the neighborhood watch, we've been there and done that, and we have found it doesn't always work as well as we would like it to work. As far as neighborhood watch, I have no objection to a few cameras here and there. Like, I'd love cameras on First Street where people think that's where the Lowell dump moved to, but it didn't. But when I broke it down, the way I see it, and speaking to other neighborhood leaders too, they agree. And sometimes with neighborhood watches, you know, things come back at us on a negative tone. But what we have found is this. To me, my neighborhood watch is my cruiser with my police officer in it. My duty as a good neighbor is to see something and say something. If it doesn't look right, doesn't sound right, doesn't smell right, it isn't right, and it's my duty to call it in. And we do realize a lot of people will say to you, and they'll say it to us, especially the elderly. I can say that because I fall on the elderly, right? But they'll say, oh, I don't want to call. I don't want to call the police. Oh, I don't want to call here or there or whatever. They'll call a neighborhood leader, and a neighborhood leader will either email into a department head, email into the city manager's office or the mayor's office, email into the department for the police department, and say, this is what's going on. And it works. The see something, say something is a safe way to do it. It's a good way to do it. And I think we have to remember, if this is going to work, we have to be team players. If I have somebody calling in to saying, gee whiz, we got 14 mattresses piled up, right? Something's wrong with this picture. We expect somebody to follow through with it. And I think we look at it as neighborhood watch is our police officers in our cruiser. See something, say something, that's our duty. You want to be a good neighbor, you see something, you say something, right? And the impact team, which we love, the impact team, that's the city's job. It works. We like it. The more the merrier. The more often, the better. But that's the way I see it divided up, and speaking to some other neighborhood leaders, it is difficult for some of them to be here at 5 o'clock. They work out of town. But we do communicate, and this little email thing is pretty neat. So we do communicate on a regular basis, and it's pretty much the same feeling. The neighborhood watch are our police on duty, whether they're walking or bike or in a car. See something, say something is our duty as neighbors, right? And the impact team is the city's combined duty. And we're either going to be team players or we're not. And if we're going to be team players, we have to be nice team players, and it'll work. Thank you very, very much. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you. Council Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a few minutes late, so I probably missed some of the discussion about the matrix, but if we could go back to the matrix report for a minute, I've got a couple of questions for the chief. When I filed the motion on the matrix report, which is some time ago now, there were two things that I did. One was I read the matrix report, but the second thing that I did was I called the lead author of the matrix report to ask him about the report. And two things intrigued me about the report, and we've talked about this before, I think, but one was, one of the recommendations was that the police department seek accreditation. And I'm not sure if it was in the report or if it was in my conversation with him, but he indicated to me that you could either have national accreditation, which is rather stringent and difficult to do, but there was also a statewide accreditation that was much less stringent and much easier to do. And he seemed to think that if we were an accredited police department, that it probably would be easier to get grant money. And so maybe that, you'd have to be accredited to find out whether or not that was true.
Right.
But have we made any headway regarding accreditation, and what are your plans, and what kind of timeline do we have on that?
Thank you, Councilor. We did talk about that I think just literally before you came in, but what we're going to do is, the first step to accreditation is to get these policy and procedures completed. We're well along the way to do that. I anticipate that they'll be completed sometime in this spring. Originally, I was ambitiously thought we could complete it in 6 months. I was a little too ambitious. Even in the matrix report, it indicates it should take about a year or more. So we'll get that done, certainly less than a year, but it may be in the March, April timeframe to get them up and disseminated. What we found is we have to allow the employees an appropriate amount of time to disseminate each one of these policies, especially some of them are much more complex and a lot more liability conscious. Once we get that done, which we're well on the way of completing that, then the next step that I want to do is get this police department state accreditation. I agree with you completely. I think a national accreditation would be a challenge that at this time, based on the physical plant we have next door, would be quite a challenge. I don't think we could do that reasonably. But I think a state accreditation is my goal. I think it's hopefully the goal of the city council, and I think we should be able to do that within a couple of years after getting these policy and procedures up and running. So that's the first step. You really can't go to the next step until the policy and procedures are up and running. But absolutely, and I told the councilors here that that would be absolutely tremendous for this police department in this city to get this organization state accreditation, and that is my goal, so I concur with you.
If we are ready by March or April, and then we begin the process, the accreditation process, do you have an idea of how long that process lasts?
I would think it's at least a year. They do, there's a couple of preliminary steps, then they do an on-site review, then they come back with recommendations. So, I would think it's at least a year, but as soon as we get these policy and procedures started, I believe we're already started the process to be involved in the queue for accreditation, but I will make sure I get that information and get it to the manager and to the city council, certainly during the budget process.
Okay. Is that a guess on your part, that it would be a year? I mean,
I think that's a good guess, though. I don't think it can be accomplished in less than a year.
okay,
But I will get the accurate information to you.
okay. And then the second thing that the report had in it that intrigued me was that if personnel was assigned differently, it would free up offices. And maybe 4 or 5. And what I liked about that was we were looking at hiring more police officers. And so if by reassigning people or just or changing things around at the police station, if we could free up more officers, then that would be the equivalent of hiring 5 more officers or whatever amount that we could get without it costing any extra money to the city. Have you made any headway along
Yeah,
those lines?
let me say this about this study. This study commissioned in 2007, 2008. Most of the work on this study was the interviews and the assessment and the on-site review was done in 2008. In 2008, 2009, we had approximately 250 police officers in the city. So just recently, we went down to 228. We're starting to make our way back very much at the behest of the city council and the city manager. So we are starting to restaff our police department incrementally. But this study was completed back when we had many more police officers than we currently do. And so the mere fact that the staffing levels have changed in this study is approximately 6 or so years or more years old, really very much taints its usefulness in terms of that. What I can tell you is that there's certain components of this study that recommend us reducing the office's free time. Their, unencumbered time, their ability to go out and do things like motor vehicle enforcement and proactive enforcement, which we all want them to do, especially in light, this is part of the new initiative that we put together in an effort to tackle some of the gun-related violence. So I don't agree with everything that's in this report, and especially when you put it in the context of the staffing levels, I think that really has to be weighed in.
Well, you're correct. The study was done in 2008, and those were different economic times. And I think the way the report reads really is that it points that if you were to reassign personnel, you'd be able to reduce the force and save money that way. I think that maybe right now we're not in a position where we want to reduce the force.
No.
But still, if we can reassign people that are doing other things and it creates more police officers on the street, that's certainly a positive thing and something that I think that everybody on the city council would like to see.
Absolutely. What I think, Councilor, is when this study was commissioned, we had some police officers that were necessitated to go back in and do some functions that had previously been done by civilian personnel. Unfortunately, when the economy turned around, we had to lay off across the city government many civilian employees in some capacity. That also occurred in the police department. So out of necessity, at some point in the 2009, we had to pull several police officers back in to do functions that were being completed by civilian personnel. I think we've started to turn that around now. As part of the reorganization that we completed this past spring, we went through this organization person by person, position by position, and tried to take those people out of those administrative positions as much as we reasonably could and put them into the patrol force, out walking, bicycling, segways in the downtown area. So that's the problem with this study. It's so old now that we've already gone through a major reorganization since the study was completed. So it would be very difficult to take some of the data that was relied on to complete this study in today's time frame because of the reorganization.
Well, I agree that the study is somewhat dated. It's 2008, but if it has never been implemented, then the conditions that existed when the study was done would probably exist now, and that's why I thought that the study was still germane. But let me ask you this. If you have done a reorganization, what has been the yield in police officers? In other words, how many police officers have you been able to put out on the street and replace with civilian personnel? And do you have plans to do more of that? And how many police officers do you think that will yield?
Well, we do. We would absolutely like to take additional sworn personnel and put them back out into the field, and that is our plan. What I can tell you is that right now we have 2 officers assigned to an MIS function because of necessity. What I'd like to do is in the 16 budget that's coming up, I've requested that we take one of those positions and replace that with a civilian personnel and take that officer and put them back out in the field. So that, I think, would be a good project to do. What it does require is funding, though. We have to, take funding to hire an MIS personnel to do that because we, as probably people realize, everything in the police department runs in some capacity involving a MIS function. an IT function. So out of the necessity, we've had to move a sworn personnel into that position, and that's been ongoing for several years. I do have a proposal to take that person and put them out. When we went through the reorganization back in the spring, I don't have exact numbers at this time, but I think we did a pretty detailed demonstration to the city council here during that time frame, and we highlighted literally position by position every officer that we redirected from other functions back out into the field. We got rid of a quartermaster that was essentially administrative function. We took that position, put that person out in the field. We took one school resource officer that was not really in the field. We put that back out into patrol. There were a few others. Which one? A safety officer. We put that person back out into patrol. We took one or two detectives, reallocated them back into patrol function. So that what the reorganization did was it took 24 patrol officers. Some of them were in other capacities, some of them were in administrative capacities, and redirected them into these district response teams. And we did that in the spring as part of the reorganization.
Okay. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you. You said that you have 2 police officers doing the MIS
That's right.
function now. And so if you replace them with civilian people, how does that translate into an increase in funding?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
How does that translate into additional funding? Why would that require?
Well, because what we'd have to do is we'd have to dedicate funding to hire an MIS person. And then take that civilian MIS person into that position with funding, and then take that police officer, that would gain you a police officer by putting that police officer out in the field in some uniform capacity.
Yes, but doesn't it gain you a police officer without any additional funding? In other words, if you have two police officers doing the MIS function now, and you replace them, you put one of those police officers out on the street, and then and the other police officer is replaced by a civilian person that I'm assuming probably would have less of a salary than the police officer. I don't know, but so how does that translate into additional funding? I guess I'm losing you there.
Where would we need the funding? Well, we would need the funding to fund the MIS person that I currently do not have in my budget.
Okay, so you're assuming that you'd take both the MIS offices and put them out on the street?
No, I think it's appropriate to have one MIS person that's a sworn personnel because of many of the requirements in terms of his ability to interact with secure public safety networks across the country and some of those other requirements. I think one MIS person being sworn is the appropriate level. The second person, I think, can be filled with a civilian IT specialist. However, I do not have the funding in the budget currently, and we haven't for several years, to make that person a sworn civilian personnel. So we'd need the funding to be for that person, and that's what I have proposed for the next 16 budget.
Okay, so this is my last question, I think. So should we anticipate that by the end of this fiscal year, all of the recommendations that you intend to adopt from the matrix study will be adopted, and that we should have applied for accreditation by the end of the fiscal year?
Started the process on accreditation by say July 1st? Yes, I think that's reasonable.
Well,
That's right.
I mean, you said earlier that you thought we'd be ready by March or April, so if we're ready by March or April, then I'm assuming that we would be
I think
applying
that's-
by July.
Yes, I think that's
right?
correct. That would be reasonable, that's right.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
But hopefully as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Manager Murphy?
Yes, I think it's important to note for the neighborhood groups that are here this evening and the people watching at home that this fiscal year, which began last July and will end on June 30th, through the support of the fiscal year 15 budget by the City Council, through the support of our grant programs, and through support of like a cooperation agreement that we're going to be presenting tonight with the Lowell Housing Authority, this City Council will have added 9 additional police officers to the force by the end of this fiscal year. 9. So, I mean, I think that's a great leap in the amount of police officers in the police force, and I just have to say that it's the support of the city council that has allowed us to do that.
Thank you. Chief, I know you said it before, but as part of your department's reorganization plan and some other stuff that you had to take care of, you reinstituted the gang and drug units that have actually been very beneficial to the department.
Right. We have a very robust combination gang and drug investigation unit. It's modeled after many other cities across the Commonwealth. They do gangs and drugs together. And so that's what we modeled after. Right now we have a total of 13 personnel in that combined unit. And I think there have been many examples of them doing very good work recently. As a matter of fact, on Friday evening, they apprehended a person, a known gang member in the city, in possession of drugs and a firearm. So that's just an example of their dedicated work.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Samaras?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for the report. I'd asked originally for you to come up with a report regarding how many civilian personnel you might need. And you did talk about first reorganizing the police department, as you've done, to look at what you actually do have at this present time. So I think, in the future, what we're going to need, if you say now that you've made your final reorganization with the staff that you have, but you still have remaining police officers doing duty that, we'll say, a civilian personnel can do, and say it happens to be 3, I think we need to know that you need 3 civilian personnel, and the figure for that, which would be much cheaper, much less than 3 officers. So that's where we can get a value, and I think that's information we need to have shortly.
Absolutely, and that speaks to Councilor Kennedy's basic, I think, idea here is that if we can redirect sworn personnel into the field and replace them with appropriate civilian personnel, absolutely, that's the goal here, and that's an ongoing process. For example, every time a vacancy occurs in the organization, whether it's civilian, especially if it's civilian, we evaluate that position to see if it can be redirected more appropriately into another area. And we're in the process of doing that with 2 vacancies that we have now. And so it's an ongoing process. Certainly my goal, I understand it completely, is this city council and the city manager wants as many sworn uniformed personnel out in the neighborhoods, interacting, collaborating with the neighborhoods, doing crime prevention, and that's what everybody wants, and that's the goal. And so we certainly will discuss that with the manager.
Thank you. Also, I think what our neighborhood people are stating very clearly is that they're looking to have the same officers, the same cruiser in the neighborhood. I mean, that's like what we used to remember. Everybody knew the name of the police officer walking the street in the local area. Everybody knew who to go to, and I think that will help in the neighborhood watch. But also, I think that we have to talk about training and getting, your officers are doing a good job. I've attended some of the neighborhood meetings, and they do talk about what's going on in the neighborhood, and they answer questions. But I really think when we talk about see something, say something, or the idea of neighbors helping protect each other. Recently, I was on vacation, I think you're aware of that, and in our neighborhood, our people, the neighbors have talked about, when you go, make sure we know so we can check on your house. And someone had gone into my driveway, and it was reported immediately to the police department. The police department reacted. And fortunately, it wasn't a robbery, but the thing is, it was handled right away, and that was because people were watching my house, as we've watched other people's homes, and that's one of the best ways we can work together. Absolutely. And I think that has to be really celebrated, and it really has, when I say celebrated, those are the positive things that we hear, but we have to be able to make sure that everybody out there understands that it does work, that if we work together. So that's something I think that has to continue. The other, one other question I'd like to bring up, in one of the neighborhood meetings, talked about, we'll say, Couple Square, and for example, some of the issues in Couple Square are the idea that at nighttime when the business is closed, they all have the iron gates, and it's like an iron gate section of the city, and that's because of fear of robberies and other things. But I think as it gets dark and neighborhood parts of the city like that, like Couple Square, there's an issue of some fear of what might happen once we'll say, lights go out, so to speak. Have you, as your organization, looked at areas like Couple Square to say, okay, how can we ensure that it's a safer place for the business people and the neighbors to walk the streets? You know, we know it's more offices, we know it's a lot of things, we know it's helping each other out, but I think Couple Square would be an example if we can make that area work and where business people do not feel that they have to use metal gates to protect their businesses. Do you know what I'm saying? It's asking a lot, but this,
No,
I'm adding to the process. But this is a continuum of everything that we're doing, we're asking of the police department. But I think we made a major effort to look at safety in the downtown. I think now the city council, I think talking to many of fellow councilors, we're looking at the neighborhoods also now. We have to make sure that the city is what we'll call the hub of the wheel, and each neighborhood is a spoke. And we want to assure that what we're trying to do in the downtown, we're doing in the neighborhoods. So is there a way of planning that or dealing with that?
Well, we do that on a continual basis. I think the city manager and his team put together a walk up in the Couple Square area before the holidays in late fall. And I think that's really the spirit of what you're talking about, because it's not just a police issue. It's a community, it's other city departments. And that area was cleaned up. There was ongoing discussions with the neighborhood and the business leaders up there about many issues, one of them being safety. So we continue to do that. And I think the other thing is, with respect to Centerville, this city council has really put their money where their mouth is, and you authorized a very substantial police substation in the Lower Centerville neighborhood that we expect will open sometime in February. And we'll certainly do a grand opening a little bit later than that. But I think that's a very, very much a symbol of the long-term commitment the city has to the neighborhoods, especially the Centerville section of the city. And I think, we're all in this together, and I think that community over there will greatly benefit from that fairly substantial footprint that's going to be there.
Great,
Thank you. But that's what I wanted to address. And I think if we take one step at a time, it's like building a puzzle, and we want the puzzle to be a perfect picture. And I think each step that you can take will help us, but we just need to know from you what support you need from us so we can ensure that it does happen. Thank you.
Councilor Mercer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, some time ago, many years ago, and we're discussing neighborhood and crime issues and police involvement, and I remember different times as city councilors, we do receive calls that is out of our purview, which means that it would be a police matter, and I, as a layperson, couldn't offer advice like that. So at the time, years ago, there was a police officer, Jeff Davidson, if you remember him. He was the community relations officer, and then he retired. Just when you get a good rapport with someone, they done well have to retire. And then he was replaced, I believe, by an Officer Keefe. There was an Officer Keefe that was. Is there a community relations officer?
Yes, Frank. Well, we're just in the process of filling what we call a safety officer. So we have that capacity is now shifted over to a safety PAL officer, and we're in the process of trying to fill that now.
I think that's a position that is very well needed, and I'm not a police officer to know the table of organization, but I think that's a key position when you're dealing with neighborhood issues. For example, I'm going to tell you, a neighbor called up long ago. This is just an example. We're having trouble with a neighbor, and I didn't know what to do. I'm not a police officer to handle that, but right away I called Jeff Davidson at the time, and he came into the picture and got the two parties together, sat them both down to figure out what was wrong. The whole thing stemmed from one of the neighbors off the medication. Once that person get back on medication, harmony was back in force. A simple thing like that created neighborhood harmony again. So to me, that's a very important position.
Councilor, that's a good certainly a great idea, but what we've done is we've divided the city into 2 sectors. Each sector has 2 districts, and in those districts, we have district response officers, along with a captain who's in charge of essentially community policing in that area, and a crime analyst. They're called problem-solving teams. So we don't just have one person anymore citywide that does that. We have, approximately 24 officers, essentially, with 2 or 3 supervisors that are available to do that, exactly what you talk about, in their own each individual districts in the city. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to try and identify these issues from a problem-solving perspective, and identify them, work with the community to resolve them before they blow up into crime generators.
There you go. I think that's wonderful. And the public should know this, because I didn't know this.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't know what their duties
Well, that's
were.
what's going to happen in Centerville. That Centerville substation
Yes.
is going to be the hub for exactly what you're talking about in that portion of the city.
Well, that's wonderful. See, the public probably didn't know that, and I didn't know that, so that's good. Thank you.
Council Belanger?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Chief, thank you. Back to the Neighborhood Crime Watch now. Okay, it's evident that, you don't want to take it as far as having pedestrians on patrol, so to speak, and I respect your decision. The neighborhood groups aren't so much in favor of that either, but I would like to see, as we, enter the spring, a very aggressive, if we're going to go with see something, say something, then we need a very aggressive campaign as we enter the season, I guess we'll call it, so to speak. To make our neighborhood safer, I think we need some real outreach this year so we don't have a repeat of last year. So if that's your decision, then I will respect it, but if you could collaborate with the neighborhood group leaders in the city to see what we can do for a campaign, if you will, how we're going to market this, and outreach to the, if we got to go on the sidewalks, on the streets, then so be it. I'd be glad to partake myself, but we need to let the public know we need their help. You need to see, when you see something, you need to call right away. As we all know, what I mentioned earlier, that's not always been the case. So if that's it, then let's run with it, but let's do it right, and let's have an aggressive marketing campaign for the spring to, really ramp up efforts, hopefully, to engage the public, because we need their help, quite frankly, and I think we're all in agreement on that.
Right.
So,
That's right.
and please, if we can include signage too, like you said, and neighborhood corners and gateways, I think that increases awareness. So I think with a good campaign, with teamed up with signage, we can have certainly a better improvement from last year. So if that's going to be it, then let's run with it. So
Okay,
I
we
think
can do that,
I
Council.
think I made myself clear. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Name, sir?
Thank you. I came in late, so could I just follow up with Council Belanger about the, what were you talking, the crime watch? So I was at a meeting when that came up, and my first reaction was, we don't want people out solving crimes, but they can certainly, if more people are out walking in the neighborhood in an organized manner, that might help, deter crime, because there's a group of people out, there's more eyes out in the street, but we certainly don't want them, trying to prevent crime, or stop crime, I should say. So could you just, I missed maybe what you might have said earlier, so.
Well, I think we talked about, instead of a citizen crime watch that has had some problematic, incidents over the course of the last several years in this country, what we would advocate for is something that Councilor Belanger just highlighted, see something, say something, involving many of the community groups and our district response officers in these problem-solving teams. So I think Councilor Belanger is right on. We will do a very, public campaign to these see something, say something. We'll include signage, and we'll continue to roll out our, community involvement, our street corner meetings, to make sure that we get as many people involved in being the eyes and ears of the police department as we possibly can.
Okay. So you could still advocate that they could go out and walk in groups,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
don't think you're going to go out and stop crime on
Right.
your own, right? Yeah.
Right, that's right.
Okay.
All
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Anything from the public? Mr.
Hi,
Willett?
good evening. Hi, my name's Dave Willett, 113 Cabot Street, also president of the Acre Coalition to Improve Our Neighborhood Action. We have a very good rapport with the council, the manager, and the police department. And I have to agree to have people just start walking the neighborhoods isn't one of the best thing because there's a couple of very bad parts and sometimes just the citizens aren't aware of where they're really walking. We have it that they call us constantly if there's a problem, see something, say something. We work very closely. As soon as a lot of times if they're nervous even to call the police, they call the neighborhood group and we call it in actively as soon as possible. And also, like we're just talking, like a walking thing, that's one of the other things that we're going to be starting this summer is walking tours or walking groups of the, like, let's say Acre and some of the other areas. So if we can get the community out walking, out enjoying their neighborhoods, it's also the more that we have good people walking around and citizens walking around, they're able to see more items, and the people who want to cause problems, they'll see more activity from the good citizens walking around, and that usually keeps them out of those areas. So we're all going to be working together in the future year, and hopefully everything should be going in the right direction. Like I said, we're starting a lot of tours that we're going to be throwing in these neighborhoods, which is going to make a great change, because we have a great city. The citizens should see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. With that, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much.